Stay more comfortable, more concealed, and in the stand longer with Osseo gear. Premium camouflage apparel created for bow hunters by bow hunters. Osseo's revolutionary patented camo patterns and innovative features are designed to keep whitetail bow hunters totally invisible and dead quiet. Elevate your game with Osseo. Visit asiogear.com and take 20% off your purchase with code TRUTH20. Mobile hunters, our buddies over at Tethered are always innovating to keep us more mobile and in the game when it counts. From the Tethered One Sticks, the Fast Pack, to the Ultra Lock saddle, Tethered is always designing to increase comfort and utility while reducing bulk, weight, and fiddle factor of mobile hunting gear. And now, they've outdone themselves yet again by creating the carbon fiber forged Predator CFX platform, the latest fully featured mobile saddle platform that raises the bar for what's possible in mobile hunting gear. Whether you're new to saddle hunting or an old tree climbing veteran, go to tetherednation.com for all your saddle hunting gear. All right, folks, welcome back to another episode of the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. And after 3 hours of troubleshooting, I got my brother from another mother on, Mr. Josh Ilderton. What's going on, buddy?
Nothing much, man. How you been?
Good, man. Thanks for bearing with me, dude. Sorry that we had so many technical difficulties, dude. You know, the more technology is supposed to make our life easier, I feel like sometimes it just makes it harder in a lot of ways.
Well, that's no apology from you. That's on my end, I'd say, you know. And then we've gone back and forth for 3 or 4 months. My fault of having to postpone because seasons and.
Well, you're a busy man, man. You got a lot going on.
Got a lot going on. I don't know if I'm taking forward steps or not.
Hey, man, everyone wants a little piece of that Ilderton magic, dude. That's what's going on.
Yeah. I wish that was the case.
Yeah. Well, hey, man, we got connected now. I always look forward to talking to you. Always like chopping it up with you. You're just, you know, I wish we got to see each other more often in person. You know what I mean? I wish we just. There's a couple buddies that I have, you know, that I'm always like, man, I just wish we lived within like an hour, maybe 2 hour drive of each other where it would be feasible to get together every so often and chop it up and hang out. And, you know, but, you know, it is what it is. We see each other as often as we can and try to chop it up as often as we can, I guess.
I don't know if our wife would agree with us getting together.
Well, I think if our last get together is any kind of indication of whether or not they would approve, I'm going to say it's probably a pretty solid negative on that. You know what I mean? I think our wives would be okay to get together. I think they would prefer to leave us somewhere else by ourselves.
Yeah, I probably in a locked room somewhere.
Yeah, I don't even know if we ever told that any of that story or any of that like kind of encounter, if you will, since, because it's been 2 years since you've been on the show. You know what I mean? I was looking back. Yeah, it has been. I was looking back just to see. I was like, because you and I talk on the phone or we'll text or whatever, and I was like trying to remember back. I was like, man, the last time we talked, I was like, I knew it was on the phone, and I was like, but when was the last time we actually did a podcast? And I actually had to go back and look, and it was in 2022 was the last time.
No kidding. I didn't realize that.
Yeah. So I don't think we ever told the story. So we'll do a quick kind of like, you know, how that all kind of played out. Yeah. So this has been probably almost 2 years ago, right? It's probably what it was.
Yeah, it was 2 years ago.
Yeah. And you were taking Brody and Moore on, like, they had a break or whatever, and you were like, hey, we're doing this trip up through the north to introduce the boys, let them see a little bit of the country and a little bit of, you know, the Northeast where the country was really kind of founded, like a little bit of a history lesson, which I thought was super cool, you know?
Yeah. And via Amtrak.
Yeah, via Amtrak. And, you know, I knew you were going to Boston and DC and you were going to the 9/11 site in New York and stuff like that. And you show the boys all kinds of, like, you know, cool stuff, like they're foundational to the country. And I just, you sent me a message and told me about it, and I was like, hey, you coming through Philadelphia? Because, I mean, Philly, as you know, huge history, right? It's like the first Congress building was here. Like, there's so much American history in Philadelphia. And you were like, yeah. And you were like, how far are you from it? And I was like, well, I'm like a 30-minute, 40-minute train ride to get to the city. And so you were like, well, let's get together and have dinner or something. I'm like, great. You know, and so we both like bourbon, right? And so I was like, absolutely. I was like, there's a really good bourbon bar in the city that has like every bourbon imaginable. And it was right downtown, so it was really easy to find, close to the train station, stuff like that. So it was convenient for you. You wouldn't have to do a lot of looking and stuff. And so it was the first time our families were getting together. So I brought my daughter, my wife, and you had your clan with you, and we got together. And we started having, a cocktail, and then we got some dinner, and then, you bought a round, and I bought a round, and then we bought another round. And and it just kind of went on that way to where it's like we couldn't let the other person have the last round. And it just turned into like, do you remember we were sitting at another table, me and you? I don't know if you remember this or not, but we ended up sitting at another table with like an African American family, and like they were truck drivers, and we sat down and we started drinking with them, and they were drinking tequila, and we were talking. They were asking us about deer hunting because they kept hitting them with their semis and stuff. Like the two guys that were truckers. Do you remember that at all?
I'm going to have to tell the truth and tell you no. I don't.
Go ahead.
What I remember is that when we were sitting there and me and you were full speed ahead,
mm-hmm.
and our wives and children were ready to roll.
Yes.
And then you were getting ready to miss your train, the last train of the night.
Yep.
That's pretty much
That's what you got from it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember the next day my wife was like, "Did you know those people you and Josh were sitting with?" And I'm like, "No."
No.
It's like,
we'll talk to anybody.
Yeah, it's like we just ended up talking to them about whatever. I was like, and they invited us over to sit down, so we sat down for a little while. Just random people, man. I was a hurt pup the next day. I will say that. That was that was a good one. That was a rough morning the next day.
I'm very fortunate when I overindulge that I'm not one to get hangovers.
No, man, you are lucky. Because that next day I was like, man, it was good night, bad morning is what that was.
Yeah. But when you on a trip like that and you're taking the kid, I'm like we don't have an itinerary, but it's like I want to hit spots, for them.
Yeah.
So I'm up and going, and after 8 days with me, going from Philly to New York to Boston back to DC, we got to DC like on the 8th day, and
right.
They sit down over by the White House after we go to Arlington and the memorials and stuff, and I was like, all right, so we got a couple hours left this evening, and we can get up in the morning before we catch the train tomorrow. And they're like, hey, can we just go back to the hotel and just order pizza? Like we're done. I wore them out.
Nice. I don't know if I ever told you this part of the story. So when we left to catch our train, we literally had to run to the train station.
I knew that. I did know that.
Like all out run. And I got my daughter with me. And so we were smart when we got on the train to come into the city, we just bought round trip tickets. We just got tickets so that way we wouldn't have to deal with trying to get a ticket when we got to the train station. Because I was like, we're probably going to run late. I don't want to miss the train. We'll just get round trip so we're good to go, right? And so we're going back, and there's at that late at night, there's no one there checking tickets or anything like that. You have to go through the automatic turnstiles, right?
Okay.
And so you're supposed to I think it's scan. I think is how it works. I don't think you put it in. And I used to go use the train all the time because I used to work in the city. So I used to know how the process all worked. But it's it'd been a couple years since I'd used it, and they changed a bunch of stuff in the train station. And we get to the turnstiles, and our train's coming. It's pulling in, and I'm putting my ticket on it, and I can't get my ticket to open the turnstile, right? And so I'm completely shit faced. You know what I mean? And so I just pick my daughter up and throw her over the turnstile. I jump over the turnstile. I help my wife over the turnstile. We run down and hop on the train. And my daughter, before whatever, it was either when we got to the train station or when we first got there to meet you, was reading a sign that says the rules of the train station or whatever. And one of them was like no jumping the turnstile, like it's like, you know, illegal or whatever. So when she tells the story, it's like her committing her first felony is what she says. She's like, my dad threw me over the turnstile and I committed my first felony. I was like, well, we bought the tickets. It's like, so it wasn't like we were like, you know, cheating them on money or whatever. I was like, but, you know, but that's how she tells. She's like, that's the time my dad made me commit my first felony.
That's great. I knew you were going to be cutting it close because your wife started stressing about catching the train.
Yeah.
And me and you we were just chumming it up, you know.
Yeah.
And getting completely lost in time.
Yeah. Yeah. That was a blast, man. That was such a good time. Yeah. And you turned me on to that Angel Envy Rye. Yeah.
It's still one of my favorites.
Yeah. And so I actually picked up I got Megan a bottle of that for, I don't remember what it was. It was like a Christmas present or something like that because she really liked it. She likes bourbon. So yeah, I picked up a bottle for her, like her stocking or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. She's into
it. I call it like a dessert bourbon.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's really good, man.
It's got that strong caramel flavor to it. And I like it before and after dinner. I can't sit around and just have glass after glass of it, but I like it. You know,
yeah, it's like one of those will do me, and that one will sneak up on you too because it's tasty.
Yeah.
You know, but
yeah.
So maybe we are better off that we don't live so close together.
Man, I don't know. You know, I still like to. Would like to be able to sit around and have a bourbon.
Yeah.
And, sit around and just bullshit every now and then.
We got to make a point to do that sometime. Bourbon and a cigar and a hangout.
Yeah.
That's
absolutely. Well, I've been to Philly. I've been up to PA, so you're just gonna have to come to WB.
That's it, man. That's it's on me now. I gotta make it to your neck of the woods for sure. That's the ticket. That's it.
It was only like a 14-hour train ride.
Right. Yeah, you did it the hardest way possible. You know what I mean? Like, so you got that over me. You know what I mean? It's like, buddy, I got on a 14-hour train ride to come see you. You know, you can't make the 3-hour drive or 4-hour drive or whatever it is. You know,
we stopped at every train station. I don't think we picked up one passenger.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, you know, people ain't got a taste for the rail like they used to. You know,
I was very surprised. You know. Just speaking of the rail, of once you got to like Philly, New York, Boston, of how many people use the train to commute into the city for work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like there was so many, you know, iron workers and, you know, blue collar workers at the train station. Like when we left Philly and, you know, we went to New York from Philly and like, it was an early morning run, and like the train was packed for people going to New York because it's only like an hour and a half train ride.
Yep.
And they were going to New York to work. They all had their work belts and everything with them, and the train stations in the cities are a lot different than the train station here in West Virginia. You know, I think there was like 6 people that morning that loaded on the train.
Yeah. When
it came, and I mean there was thousands.
Yeah.
Once we got into the city, using the train as means of travel.
Yeah. I mean, it's you're probably on the Excella, I would imagine, the Amtrak Excella train. That's like usually the early morning train that'll take you to New York. Because I'll take that once in a while when I have meetings in New York for work. You know, if I have to be there for a morning meeting or whatever, it's like I'll just get down to the 30th Street station here, like in Philly, and jump on that. It's kind of a pain in the butt because it's like I'm kind of in between where I can go to 30th Street Station, take me in the morning with traffic like 45 minutes or so to get there, or I can go the opposite way and like jump on one in Newark, but it's about the same distance for me, you know, to get there, you know, to jump on the train. Yeah, and it's only like an hour, a little over an hour, you know, to get there, and bada boom, bada bing, you're in the city, take my meetings, jump back on it. It is crazy though, because that, like when you get dropped off in New York, whatever, that place, it's almost like this. It's kind of like an airport, like is like the size.
Oh,
and like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not like
Yeah.
just a little spot to catch a train. It's a big to do.
Yeah. I mean, and it was a great trip. I mean,
Yeah.
I was a little bit apprehensive about it at first, but ended up, I don't know who the designer was of Amtrak, the rooms,
Mm-hmm.
but like in my opinion, I would travel by train anywhere after going on it,
Mm-hmm.
just because you have we had two rooms. The boys were in a room, and Stacy and I were in a room, and we had our own sink, had our own shitter, two beds, comfortable chairs. You can take all your own food. You can take your own drinks. I mean, it was comfortable.
Right. So now what we need is an Untamed season of riding the rail to hunt.
Yeah, by God, you could do it. I'm telling you, it would be. You could definitely do it. And riding from New York to Boston was one of the best train stretches of railroad. Going through all those coastal towns
Yeah.
was cool as hell.
Yeah, I've never done that stretch before. That's the one stretch that I haven't done, but it would be cool. I mean, just driving up through there is awesome. Like, I love that part. For a lot of years, I shouldn't say a lot of years, a handful of years in a row, when we would do a family vacation, we would do it all through we would go somewhere in the Northeast, like pick somewhere different every year and just go like somewhere in Maine, Rhode Island, like wherever, and just kind of bebop around to like the coastal towns, there. And it's just, I don't know. I love it. Like, it's an area of the country that I could totally live.
Yeah, I like it up there too. I mean, now the boys, to my surprise, because it makes you think, what the hell our education system's teaching these kids. They didn't even know who the hell Paul Revere was.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah, dude. So Philly and Boston are just huge history towns, and I love American history.
Man, I do too. It's funny because did you always like history?
Yeah,
you did. Okay, so I didn't. Like, history was probably one of my least favorite subjects growing up, and it wasn't until, I mean, I don't know what age, but for whatever, I started getting interested in history, and part of it is just like that, wanting to understand, like, where do you come from? How did things turn out? Why are they the way they are? And stuff like that. And so now it's like, I've been watching recently, I don't know if it's a documentary or how to classify it, but watching kind of the history and like how World War I came about, and like the building of the army, right? Because we really didn't have like an army per se, like after the Civil War, and we had a very, very small, we didn't have a battle ready type of army. And it really was built. Right. It was really built during the course of World War I, is whenever the army was really kind of, or our military was really kind of stood up. And I really never understood like the dynamics of that, or like, I kind of loosely always knew like the countries that were involved, but I was always kind of like, well, what kicked that thing off? Like, everyone knows World War II, like why that got kicked off, or Vietnam or whatever, right? Like, but I was like, this is like the one war that like I really never learned about in school, like a whole lot about, and so I've been watching it, and it's been awesome.
Yeah, I mean, and that's just the reality of generational forgetfulness, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
World War I, I don't know if any of my family was living. I'm sure that they were living during it when I was a youngster. Yeah. But like, they all remember World War II. So they talked about it. Mm-hmm. They all remember Vietnam. So they talked about Vietnam. Now everybody nowadays, you got very few people talking about Vietnam, and they're all talking about 9/11 and Afghanistan and Iraq. Right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just because everybody's dying off. There's nobody to tell that story unless you're listening to historians or reading books or finding out for yourself.
Yeah, because and maybe what kind of kicked it off for me was like my wife's grandfather passed away a couple weeks ago, and he was 92, I think 92, and he was in like he worked for the Pentagon, and he was in the first version of the NSA, like so the first
Yeah.
like intelligence gathering group in the US, and did all kinds of cool stuff. And so, and fortunately, like my daughter was able to spend some time with her great grandfather and ask him questions, and she actually did a couple of reports, like using him as like her source, talking about history and like things he's lived through and like what he has seen and stuff like that. And you know, and so that probably is really kind of what probably kicked it off, because it's like you always, you know, I try to find elders now, just like in hunting, right? When you find like the old timer that like just, you know, has seen more than you and your buddies have seen collectively, you know, it's like, and
Yeah.
you sometimes don't think of them as being the resource that they really are. And so, you know, I remember my grandfather, my dad's dad, like he fought in World War II. And I remember talking to him about it, you know, and that was kind of how I got somewhat educated on it or got interested in it, you know, because he was willing to share with me. It was funny because my dad saw me talking to him. He's like, "What are you talking your pap about?" And I said, "I was asking about World War II," because he got shot and, you know, he took a wound and stuff like that. And I was like, "Oh, I was talking about it, you know, his experience in World War II." And he's like, "Really?" And I was like, "Yeah, why?" Because he was a stoic old man. Like he didn't say a whole lot, you know what I mean? Super nice, but he just didn't say much, you know? And I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Did he say anything to you?" I was like, "Oh yeah, he told me all about like, you know, the tours that he did and like when he got shot and stuff like that." He's like, "Really?" And I'm like, "Yeah, why?" He's like, "I've known the man for like 80 years and never said a word to me." You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
none of his brothers or sisters. He's like, he's never ever talked about it. He's like, you know, I was like, "Well, did you guys ever bring it up?" And he was like, "No." It was like, it was something we didn't discuss with him. And I was like, "Well, I asked him and he was willing to talk about it. So we did."
I
You
was
know?
going to say, probably because they never asked.
That's just it. Like everyone was always a little scared of him, you know, because he was just very stoic and he wasn't ever mean. He just didn't say a whole lot. You know what I mean? And so, you know, I would just kind of ask him, you know, being kind of funny or whatever. Ask him, I was like, "Hey," because he got shot in the ass. And so I was like, "Hey," he's like, "Pat, let me see that wound," you know? And that was how the conversation started, you know? And then we just kind of started talking about it. And, you know, and I love learning history that way, man, from first like person accounts. It's, you know, I always tell my daughter, I'm like, you know, when you meet someone who's older, like just ask them some questions about their past. You know what I mean? I was like, because you will get an education that you won't get anywhere else.
Yeah. That's what I don't know if I've ever told you this, but it's like some people have talked about like the Untamed.
Mm-hmm.
And like when I was growing up, you know, if we were looking at history of the family and stuff, we'd look at black and white photos, you know, and they'd be like the cut edges. I'm talking about old photos, you know. Most kids today, they don't even know what a 35 millimeter is. And that's the greatest thing, like with our videos and stuff. It's like if I died today and Brody gets married and has kids in 10 or 15 years, and I ain't around, he's going to be able to tell his children, "Hey, y'all want to know your grandfather? Here he is.
Mm-hmm.
This was my dad."
Yeah.
And they're going to be able to see me, hear me. They're going to be able to feel the emotion through video instead of looking at a still picture.
Yeah.
And then them just telling stories. They'll be able to get a pretty damn good picture of who I was off the videos, because I'm pretty much the same when the camera ain't around. You know, and that's the greatest thing, man. It's like it ain't never going away. No matter if the Untamed goes away or not, the videos are always going to be there.
Yeah. It's funny you say that because I've had that same thought. Not so much video. I mean, I have some YouTube stuff, you know, but, you know, that my daughter, grandkids, whatever, you know, could listen to the podcast and hear me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Hear my voice, you know, and that is kind of we do live in a unique time in that regard, that everyone has an opportunity to do that, right? To kind of capture those things. Because you know, part of me's be curious to ask you this. I like it. I like the benefit of it because, like, if I am gone, like, you know, she could always listen back and hear her dad talk, or, you know, her kids could listen to me and kind of get to know me a little bit. But then there also is a part of me that, you know, do I maybe appreciate my grandfather a little bit more because there's parts about him that I don't know that I have to kind of like put the pieces together myself, and he almost kind of becomes the thing that I want him to be. If that makes sense. You know what I mean? Like, to where, you know, he's 30 foot tall and bulletproof. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, and there's, to me, there's like something to that. Like there's a benefit to kind of understanding like all the flaws of a person and like all those things that you lay bare, right? There's a authenticity there, but then there's also like a side of it that maybe those people will miss because they know all of it, right? As opposed to somewhat you getting to create that person's image and how you want to remember them.
Yeah. And the fact that you always, if you go digging, you can always find stuff to intrigue you. Mm-hmm. And if it's just all just laid out there, there's not that hunt for information.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And does it mean as much if you don't have to find it?
Right.
Yeah.
There's that part of it too.
Yeah, my wife's big into like genealogy stuff, and so she's been building her family tree, like in her free time when she takes my daughter to horseback riding somewhere. There's a place that's close by that she can kind of go and do research, and so she's been going and like investigating her family tree and trying to connect all the pieces. And her, especially since her grandfather, he was ill, and you know we knew his time was coming, and so you know they've been going through a lot of his stuff, and so they've been taking like old letters and stuff like that he has from like distant family members with names and addresses, and so she can kind of like try to connect the dots and stuff like that. Which is, I'm not that far into it. She's super into it. Like that's like if she could do nothing but that's what she would do. Like I can't do it. I find it interesting when she finds something out. I'm like, cool. Like you know, I'm glad she tells me, but like I don't have the patience to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I've traced back, you know, as far as where both sides of the family have come from. Mm-hmm. And like my dad's side of the family, I found like our family crest and stuff like that. But people wise, like I kind of stop at the people that I've met, you know?
Yeah.
You know, my grandfather's still living. He's going to be 98 in October.
Wow.
You know, he's the last one, but, you know, he's full of history.
Yeah.
And then, but I was fortunate to grow up with great grandparents for a pretty long time. And a lot of people are not fortunate. You know, they usually pass pretty quick. But I was around my great grandparents quite a bit before they passed. Yeah. So it kind of ends for me there. I listen to those stories about their grandparents, and then that's about it.
Yeah. My, I had some great grandparents, I think up until, man, I want to say probably like high school, I think roughly I had like
that's
great.
Well, that's me. I was probably 14, 15 years
old. Roughly around that. And I didn't have a bunch of them. It was my grandma Elbin was the last one. And she might have been the only one that I really had growing up that I remember, like for the most part. You know, now my daughter, you know, she's 15, and you know her great grandfather just passed away, and then she still has a great grandmother who's alive, who's actually the same age. She's 92, and so she's still kicking and going strong, man. So I always tell her, like, anytime you get to visit her, man, just ask her about stuff that she saw. You know, I was like, because it'll blow your mind. You know.
Yeah, they've been through it.
That's right. Like, you know, talking about like not having electricity, you know what I mean? Like, I remember my one great grandmother, it was actually that grandmother's mom. And she I forget how old she was when she passed, like mid 90s, but she was born in 1898, you know? And so, which is like growing up as a kid, and she got dementia and Alzheimer's, and that's kind of what like her ending was. And so whenever that first started happening, like she actually moved in with my grandmother to stay, and I was always at my grandmother's house. And so I'd be there and I'd go like eat lunch or something like that. And great grandmother would be there. And so I'd sit down with her. And so she wouldn't, like, this is before she got the Alzheimer's real bad, but like she didn't have a good memory for like anything that happened like recently or whatever, but you could ask her anything about like her life and she remembered everything. And so I remember just sitting down with her, like, well, we'd be eating dinner or whatever, and we would sit at the table for like 2 hours, and I would just pepper her with questions. It'd be like, when's the first time you saw a car? Like, when's the first time you saw a TV? You know what I mean? Like, and she can remember, like, oh, that was Bobby Sue, and they had a TV. They were the first one in town to have one. And they know. She remembered exactly when she saw her first car. And
that it's all relative.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at it, like I tell Brody, like, about these kids don't know what it's not like to have Apple in the world.
Yeah.
To have an iPhone, to have a, I don't know, a droid, Android, or whatever the other side of the smartphone is. I mean, not having a flat screen, having a big tube TV.
Turn the antenna with your hands outside to try to get a channel.
They don't understand any of that.
Yeah.
I mean, hell, I didn't have my first cell phone until I was, I just got out of the Marine Corps, so I was 23.
Yeah, me too.
Before, they'd let us use satellite phones that you could use while you was overseas to call back home. But you'd have to talk, and then your family didn't understand. They'd have to wait for it to finish before they could speak. So it was just a jacked up conversation.
It's kind of like when we first started this podcast. It was kind of like when we first started.
Yeah.
We went back in time.
Yeah. So it's just different stuff, but it seems like it repeats itself.
Yeah. And I try to tell my daughter to think it blows her mind when I'm like, yeah, we didn't have internet when I was growing up. She's like, what? I'm like, yeah. I was like, internet didn't happen until, like, real internet that you could actually use in like a useful way didn't happen until I was in college. I was like, in high school, I was like, you had AOL dial up and you had some chat rooms, but you really didn't have websites yet. Like maybe a couple, but it wasn't like you could go through the entire internet in 1996 in 5 minutes. That's the way it was. And then you fast forward to today, man, to where, I mean, if you lose one of these, it's like, man, you're lost. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And just think about, like, for our purposes for hunting, like, how much do we rely on this thing versus what we relied on when we were kids?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I
mean, I use mine every day when I'm hunting. Whether it's taking pictures, using our mapping apps. When before it was like, I'm going to go to the big white oak up on the hill. So I'll be over in this area. Mm-hmm. But yeah, technology, man, keeps on pushing forward.
Yeah, it's you're right, because it's funny. I remember, before I had like any map software or anything like that, and it's funny because like that's not even that old. Like that's not been around like that long, And I was hunting with a buddy of mine, and I had just moved back to Pennsylvania from Florida, and I was hunting the family farm, but I hadn't really ever been. I'd been there, but I hadn't been there very often because it was a piece of property that I wasn't familiar with growing up. It was my wife's dad's family place, and I was going to go hunt it for the first time, and my buddy Tate, he had some stands already set, and he was like, "Hey, go down like to the backfield, walk down that trail that's off to the side, go down about so far, right, and then on the left-hand side, you're going to see like a grove of pine trees, and there's a thicket in there, and then there's one whatever tree, poplar tree that just is completely out of place and shouldn't be in there. That's where the stand's at." Those were the directions I got. You know what I mean? Like,
oh yeah, yeah,
yeah.
I mean, that's the way it was.
Yeah, and I went in and I found the tree. In the dark. I don't know how I found it. Hunted it, came out. And then that evening we were, met up and at the truck. He's like, "Did you find that stand?" And I was like, Yeah. I was like, "I found it." It took me like probably like 15 minutes like to find it. I was like, once I got in there, I was like, "But I found it." And he's like, "Oh, I'm surprised you found it."
No doubt.
you know. But that was just how it was, man. It's like, you just kind of figured it out, man. It's I think sometimes though, it's like, I don't know about you, but I sometimes kind of wish those days back to a degree.
I don't wish the days back, but I think that I I think I made with technology. It makes it um, you overthink yourself
Mm-hmm.
with all the overflow of information, the technology with the mapping, and instead of just going out there and just doing what I used to do.
Right. Do you catch yourself often now where you in the moment you recognize like, what am I doing? Like I'm making this way harder than it should be. Or do you not realize it until after the fact?
Sometimes, if I foul up like a spot and stalk or something like that, or if I hit a streak of a bunch of days where I'm just like, because I think you can hunt too hard,
Mm-hmm.
or I feel like I can. I don't know if it's relatable to everybody, but I feel like I can hunt too hard to where you get out of balance. I mean, you've talked about this in our text and calls. It's like you're hunting too hard and you're making it too hard
Mm-hmm.
when
Yeah.
it shouldn't be that way when you're out there.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. No,
um,
I agree with you. Like there's and I feel like more recently I started to be able to strike that balance a little bit better, um, of trying to just simplify it and doing a better job of catching myself when I'm making it harder than it needs to be. And part of it is I think not that I had to put myself on restriction necessarily, but I had to what I stopped doing was incessantly kind of checking trail cameras and relying on that data. Like within the season. Like where I
yeah,
use it after the season and we'll make a plan, and I don't really get swayed by anything that I see in the season, like from a trail camera perspective, right? I rely on my knowledge of the area, the historical knowledge of a spot I might be hunting, what I'm seeing in real time with my own eyes versus what I see on a trail camera picture or whatever. And that's just one way I've been able to do it. And now I don't really bother much with, the trail camera information during the course of the season. Like I'll check it like everybody else, like during Velvet. I want to see like what inventory might be around. But once I kind of know what inventory is around, I'm not really checking it anymore, and I think it's situational because most of the time I'm hunting just areas for opportunity where there's usually going to be good bucks, or I have good sign, or that I know holds good bucks typically. This year might be a slightly different because there is a deer that I'm kind of looking at, and so that might be an instance where it's like I might look in October to see if maybe he's made an appearance at some point. But by and large, I try to stay away from it and just kind of use my own kind of gut and instinct and woodsmanship and be a human, I guess is,
yeah. I mean, it can game cameras can take over
yeah.
your psyche. I mean, it just. I mean, last year was a complete example of it. I mean, I had planned on hunting, in Kentucky, late October. Started getting trail cam pictures of some nice deer here in West Virginia. And I was like, man, I'm not going to go to Kentucky. Deer on their feet, they're moving, yada, yada. And it's like, I never made it to Kentucky, and I ended up grinding. I mean, grinding from mid-October to the second to last. I didn't even hunt the last day of the season because of the intel I was getting on cameras. And it's like, I'm going to stick with the schedule this year no matter what. I got dates that I want to be back in West Virginia, and whatever's happening's happening. And I'm just going to go about my business and just hunt. And then, when you're hunting that hard, you get out of balance with life, get out of balance with family, get out of balance with work. And then I feel like when you're out of balance as an individual, like nothing seems to work.
Yeah.
Like you're nothing. I mean, it doesn't matter. Like if you're out of balance with work, then work's not going good. I mean, just like if you're giving too much to one thing, everything else goes all to sorts.
Yeah.
And I feel like last year was the worst year that I let that happen. And I ate tag soup. I had an opportunity, one, but I'll usually have a good half dozen opportunities, and I had a good run from 16 to last year of killing good deer and even seeing good deer. But I just feel like I felt this inside, and I don't even know what it was. It was just like I felt this inside, like I've got to go, hunted my guts out. And it was like it wouldn't matter if I was hunting and learning stuff, but like I was hunting and getting no return.
Yeah.
Then after season, I was like, what a worthless 3 months.
Yeah. I've had seasons like that too, where I just felt like, I don't want to ever say like days in the woods were wasted, because like I'm out there and that's good on its own. But I know what you're saying, where the hunts just weren't producing, and it partially was because like I was so spread thin that wherever I happened to be in a moment, whether I was at home with my family or whether I was in the woods hunting or whether I was at work, I wasn't ever present in any one of those places, because I was already at the next thing that I was going to need to do and not focused on the thing that I was doing at hand. And that was a big learning thing for me when I realized that. And so now, I try to not focus on what I'm not able to do, and try to spend all my attention on the things that I can do, to keep me kind of,
I get it,
focused. You know what I mean? Because like a lot of times you get caught up in that, like,
yeah,
I want to be out hunting today, but I got to work. And so now I'm not really focused on work. And so work's kind of going to shit, but I'm going to go hunt tomorrow, and I'm hunting tomorrow, but there was a thing I was supposed to do with the family. So while I'm hunting, I'm really kind of thinking about the thing I was supposed to do, and I got to get done tomorrow because I put that off with the wife and the kid. And so I was never present in any one of the places. And so now it's like, when it's family time, it's family time, and I'm not thinking about hunting. I'm not thinking about work or whatever. And then when it's hunting time, that's what I'm doing. I'm not thinking about the other stuff. And I might get fewer days to hunt. But they end up somehow being better. Like where it's just like they're more fulfilling, one, and two, I usually end up having better encounters and just better hunts in general, because I'm way more tuned in and I'm not making mistakes and I'm not being sloppy, because that's what I found is like I start making really stupid mistakes whenever I'm not present on the hunt.
Yeah. No, I mean, I've made tons of mistakes, and it's like, I don't know how to explain it. When you, just like when I'd be ground hunting this past fall, like I was in it, but then I wasn't doing what I normally do because I was trying to make something happen. It's like I was in frantic mode. Like I had to kill a deer. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's like the assumption of expectations.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, is it like,
You know what I mean?
no, I totally get what
It
you
gets
mean.
it,
Like, totally. I totally get
and
what you mean.
and 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 I won't do it again because the fact of the matter is where we hunt, you know, to all kinds of great whitetail hunters, bow hunters, are in this area, and they'll go streaks of 2 or 3 years eating tag soup, and it happens. I mean, that's the area. So it's like, but then you have these, like, I assume that people are expecting a video of me killing a buck.
Right.
So it throws your mind off a little bit, and you start losing, and just go out and hunt, man.
Yeah.
Go out and hunt like you always, like I'm an odds guy, so I always hunt a lot because I think if you're out there, it increases your odds to gain an opportunity. Now, it doesn't mean you're going to kill anything, but you know, I'm an odds person, and so I always hunt a lot. But like usually when I feel tired or whatever, I'll say, okay, I'm going to take a couple of days. Well, I didn't do that this past year, and it was just complete burnout, overload, putting stress on somebody to go out and do something that they absolutely love, putting it on yourself, I mean.
Yeah.
And have a real passion for the outdoors. I just love being out there. I mean, even if it's just out breathing that crisp air, I mean, I love it. And then having that unwanted pressure that you put on yourself, that there's an assumption that you're going to be putting out this video of killing a deer.
Yeah.
And then that pressure turns into negative, and it just, you get all out of sorts, and that's where I was at.
Yeah.
Oh, see, I couldn't do anything right.
Yeah. No, I totally get that, man. Like it's, you know, I think anyone who, you know, runs a podcast or YouTube channel or whatever in the outdoor space, right? Whether they admit it to you or not, there is a period that you kind of go through, at least I think so, where you feel the pressure to produce something because you do something in the space, right? Like that ultimately kind of comes with it. And then it usually takes like a moment where, you know, at least for me it did, where I was starting to not like it, you know, anymore, you know, like not liking hunting, but like it was starting to feel, the way I kind of explained it was whenever I was a musician, and that's what I was doing. And I loved music growing up. And that was what my passion was. And then, you know, started doing it for a living. Like that's how I was doing things, you know, and it became kind of a job, and then it started sucking all the fun out of it, you know, and then I started to hate it, you know, because it was just like, it was no longer passion any longer. It was because I had to. Right. And for me, I hit a point with the podcast where it started feeling like that, to where I was like, hunting started feeling like that. The good thing was like, from my past experience with music, I was really aware whenever it started feeling that way, why it was. Right. And so for me, you know, what I learned, you know, and this is, I think, is just something, you know, when you're our age and you get a little older, right, you start to pick up those signals a lot more quickly, you know, and I recognized right away kind of what it was. And I was like, and that was actually really when I started jiu-jitsu, and it was really because I needed something to kind of give me some separation and time away, because I would spend the whole off season scouting like crazy, hanging trail cameras, thinking about it, e-scouting like every single day. Like I was trying to do something every day for hunting, and I was really just starting to burn myself out. And then I did, you know, added in, you know, training, like my training schedule and stuff. And it gave me time away to like give hunting some breathing room. And then whenever I would get a chance to go out into the woods to scout or whatever, I was just like jacked. I was like, oh man, I can't wait to get out. and it was because I put that space
Yeah.
between myself and it, and that's kind of what I'm talking about whenever I say, that presence, right? It's like, how the frequency I train kind of forces me to have like forced presence. And because I just don't have as much time to do it as I have in the past. And so when I do have time to do it, it's like, man, I am locked in, it's like, cause it's just that, and that was a big learning kind of moment for me. And then it kind of brought the fun back into the podcast because I was like, I don't need to talk about like whether or not I kill a deer or not. Like, truthfully, nobody gives a shit, to be honest. You know what I mean? Like,
That's right.
That's the truth of it.
That's
like,
right.
I text you whenever I was in Kansas, and, my buddies that know me, like, were stoked whenever I killed that deer. Like, you were stoked, Chad was stoked, but there's only a handful of guys who still would remember, you know what I mean? And so, like, what do you care if someone else, what other people are thinking or whatever? And I think that's kind of like where you get to. And then it makes it fun again, because then you start to just realize, dude, I'm still just doing this for myself. Regardless of whether I'm recording a podcast or making videos, it's still about me enjoying it.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's, we kind of, because all of us hunted hard, but then like I took a step back, not take a step back because we trudged on through the winter. And then like this turkey season, we just were free, felt free. And it was like, let's just go out and do what we do and have a good time. And it was, hell, the best season we've ever had. And it was a blast. It was no stresses. We were just out there just hammering turkeys, and it had a damn hoot, like we always do. So that's where I want to keep my hunting psyche, if you say, for this fall.
Right. So so the big question is, like, how do you do that? Because, it's, I think, for people who just, that don't have like an outlet, like a, business related to hunting, a YouTube channel, a podcast or whatever, I think advice for them is easier because it's just like, hey, dude, like, nobody cares. Like, nobody's watching, just go do what it is that you do. But when there's eyeballs or listeners or whatever, like, how do you keep that frame of reference, right? And not let like the bad stuff kind of seep in, and keep it fun and keep it light.
Yeah, all the white noise.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest thing with us is we just, for me is like, I just want to continue being genuine and authentic. And then, not just with the viewers, but with myself too. Excuse me. I just want to be real to me. I mean, I'm a big man in the mirror guy, so if I'm fouling up and out of balance, then I've got to talk to the man in the mirror and get it fixed.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's just having hard conversations with yourself and being truthful with yourself, and saying that you're overindulging in this or overindulging in that, and you need to do this, and you make those adjustments, and then you start feeling better.
Right.
So I have a game plan for the fall.
There you go.
And I'm going to do my best not to deviate.
Right. Nice. So so I'm going to ask you an off the wall question here. It's not really off the wall, 'cause it's something that you're familiar with, but it's probably out of context for like where we're at in the conversation right now. But I want to get back to like what your plan is. So I'm going to jot a note, like, what's the plan? So I remember to get back to that. But it just popped in my mind because you'd mentioned earlier, about, I forget what it was, but ground hunting, right? And really kind of getting after it. And the one thing, as you know, and we've talked about this, it's, ground hunting is something I've added in the past couple years, been progressively kind of getting better at it, had success with it last year. So I've been kind of learning the the ground game side of things, and certain things have started popping out to me. And we've talked about some of this stuff. And but I mean, you know as well as anybody, it's like you can talk about it with somebody and and discuss it, and until you start to go out and like really see it and experience it, like it doesn't always make sense. And one thing I started picking up being on the ground is, one, just like the mobility of it is great, but I also started to feel like, and I don't know if you've experienced this as well, I almost feel like I get away with scent just a little bit more on the ground than I do when I'm in a tree. Do you feel the same way, or do you feel the opposite? Because I don't know. I feel like I'm crazy, but I almost feel like I'm able to cheat it just a little bit more when I'm on the ground.
I don't know if you can or not. I think you can put yourself in a position to cheat scent on the ground better than you can when you're hanging.
Right.
And you can always make adjustments on the move to cheat the scent.
Right.
But now I've seen it where I'm sitting there looking at it and the wind's just swirling and the deer's, got their nose up in the air and we're 30 yards from him and he knows there's something there, but he don't have a clue where it's at.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. The reason I was asking is because I almost felt like in the plains with all that grass that you're in, I almost felt like it dumbed it down a little bit to where it didn't travel as far. Like I was maybe saturated where I was at, but my wind direction from 300 yards away wasn't nearly as important, like on the ground, as it was if I was in a tree and 300 yards away and there's nothing holding my scent up, being a barrier. Like that scent's going to get there easy and far, right? But I felt like on the ground, like there were so many times where I felt like I had deer that were downwind of me that never knew. And by the time they got close enough to me, they'd work themselves out of my downwind side. And then I was fine. You know what I mean? Like I almost felt like I was getting away with that. And I felt like I for sure got away with a lot more sound, just like the grass, especially out there, that prairie grass is a lot thicker than people think. And it would just muffle. Like I was being so quiet, like to start, as I should be. But then I realized it's like, oh man, I can move a lot more here and they can't hear me just because of how much barrier I have in front of me for the sound to have to travel. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, no, I think that definitely sound, I think you can get away with a lot more. Because I think that's their natural sound waves. And if they can't see you, then it's just another animal or something. Now, you're not just going to go tromping through because it might not be the sound. The sound might alert them, but then they might see you, with shadows. And I don't know if deer can really see you or not. I'm a big flash of light guy, so if you're moving and they're seeing different lights, then that's what they're like, well, what is that? We better get out of here. But I definitely think that you can get away. That's one thing that I have got, and I've been hunting on the ground for years, and probably in the last 2 or 3 years, I've been way more aggressive on even trying to get tighter in, and the deer, they're hearing stuff all the time. Even and it happens with turkeys too. I always thought, man, you got to call these turkeys from 200 or 300 yards away. And man, we snuck on turkeys 20 yards over the hill and set up real fast, and they're not worried about that sound as long as you're not sound like a group of elephants coming through. They're not worried. They're not. They're wondering what's up there. But as long as they don't see you, they're not too stressed about it.
Right.
And I think it's the same thing with deer, but so, it's a give and take. I mean, it takes, if you're going to ground hunt, I feel like the only thing to do is just go do it.
Yeah.
You can listen to some podcasts, you can watch some videos, but when it's all said and done, you got to take everything that you've gathered and say, okay, I think this is the good stuff. Put that in your repertoire. This is the bad stuff. Throw it out. And then what you put in your repertoire is only going to be like 10%. The 90% is boots on the ground. Like you were out there, figuring out the terrain features that you can move on, finding the deer, learning how to walk in the woods, where you want to stop and try to set up if you're going to blast for a little while, where you can still, there's just all kinds of stuff that you're going to learn while you're doing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that was the advice that you gave me early on when we talked about it. Cause I think the first podcast you and I did together, like we talked a good bit about ground hunting and stuff, because that was really kind of top of mind for me, because I knew I was going to start traveling to plain states, and I knew I wanted to start doing stuff on the ground more to give me just more setups, just even locally, more setups. And I remember you said, like, just go out and start trying it, like because you're going to mess some stuff up,
right.
And that was it. And like, and those were, I don't know that I've heard truer words in terms of talking to someone about ground hunting than what you told me, because that was exactly what I needed to do. It's like, I'd talked to you, I'd talked to Zach, I'd talked to Jared, guys who I knew that I looked at like, hey, these guys are really good ground hunters, and just got some tips. Pretty much every one of you said you just got to go out and start doing it now, because you're gonna screw up a bunch of stuff, and it won't be until you screw it up and you go like, well, why'd that screw up? It's like, oh, because of that, and then you don't do that anymore, right? You just start eliminating stuff, and that was really, what it comes down to. And I don't think I'm that good at it. You know what I mean? It's like, I think I played a scenario right last year that worked out for me, and did a couple things right. But on the whole, I still feel like there's a lot, that I need to work on, but I've cut out a lot of the major stuff that I think that I was doing wrong to start. You know what I mean?
Hell, I don't think I'm any good at it, but I keep on trying. Just this past season, I could go back and about the mistakes, but the biggest thing now is I'm fully confident in like the actual stock, but I continuously learn about the terrain. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Of where you can move, where you can't move. I've started paying more attention to thermals, which I never did probably until the last 3 or 4 years. Sometimes I overthink them, but I do pay attention to those more, especially here in the mountains. But other than that, man, it's just like, it's a new day every day I go out. I'm going to learn something.
Yeah.
Or I'm going to foul something up. Only thing that I want to do is decrease the foul ups to increase my odds for an opportunity.
Right. Yeah. I think the biggest thing that I learned over these past couple seasons was, like, I always did a pretty good job playing the wind, playing the thermals. That was something that I kind of took from like just how I hunted in general. But the biggest thing for me was probably moving, knowing when to move, when not to move, knowing when I had cover, when I didn't have cover, using, like you were saying, using terrain to hide, and it doesn't take much. That was the biggest thing that I had to learn, is like, especially out in plain states, it's like, man, you don't have a ton of terrain, so you got to figure out how to get skinny, in certain areas, where it's like, I got a little bit and I need to be able to use it. So how am I going to use it? And then the biggest thing I probably learned was how to get drawn, because I blew a couple opportunities on drawing, like on the ground. I probably would have filled a tag in Kansas a lot faster had I been better at it. But, it's just one of those things where I hadn't done it before, so it was just, I had to figure out how to get it done and when the opportunity was to draw. And, I think, figuring out, because the animal never kind of comes in the way you kind of expect it to. And so you almost have to like anticipate, even more so than when you're in a tree, like where are your move opportunities to get readjusted to be able to draw, right? Like that was the biggest thing for me, because it's like you're in a tree and you set up and you're like, all right, well, this deer's going to come this way. And it's like, as long as I got some back cover and maybe got a little bit of front cover, it's like he's going to get to a certain point to where he can't really make any other decisions. And then I can move to get into a position to draw. But when you're on the ground, it's like when they're that close, it's like, man, and I agree with you. It's like, I don't know how well they see 100%, but I'm a believer also. It's like they see like someone walking behind a shade in the sun. Like they see that flicker. That's all they're really picking up. You know what I mean? It's like, and so the smallest of movements at that close, it's like, man, you are toast, and you only get one chance to really draw. Like where in a tree, you might get one or two chances to draw, especially if they're preoccupied looking at something, but on the ground, it was like, there was one where it's just like, I made the mistake of not drawing when I set up to make sure I had room. And that's what screwed me up. Like I actually got drawn, but I hit something when I was drawing.
Yep.
And that's what screwed. Yeah. It's just like simple stuff like that maybe you can get away with in a tree because you got some separation and you're up above them and they might be distracted. But on the ground, man, it's like, it's almost like their sixth sense is even like heightened even more to where it's like they pick up everything.
Yeah. And I mean, for me now, like I still go through that. Those are things in my head that I'm telling myself, if you're going to stop here, make sure you can draw. Those are the things that are like muscle memory, but they're like mind memory.
Yeah.
But like my focus is like me trying to figure out what I think the deer's thinking or what his state of mind is in or her state of mind. If a doe comes into play or whatever, like trying to figure out what the deer is telling me because that tells me how much I can move and how much I can't move, if I can draw, if I'm going to be sneaky when I draw. That deer is communicating by his actions. Mm-hmm. And, trying to figure out that now has helped me out tremendously. Not now. I mean, I've been watching, the deer all the deer I've stalked. I mean, in the last several years, I mean, just trying to figure out, well, what's he thinking? He's comfortable right here. We can make some movements. He's doing this. I can do this, and figuring out the deer and reading what the deer is telling you will tell you a whole lot what you can do on the ground.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. That was the death nail that, for me this year for that deer. It was, it was also that time of year too, where they're preoccupied. So I had that in my favor, but he wanted to know what the does were doing that kind of moved by me or whatever. And so I knew, I had a draw opportunity, and that he's not going to really be much the wiser, at that point. I'm going to have I can get away with some funny business here probably because he's really just going to be paying attention to the does,
Right.
And as long as they don't get completely spooked, he'll be fine,
That's right.
So my focus was more on like not letting the does, know the jig is up until I got an opportunity at him, know. But yeah, man. So I want to get back to like what you said earlier, because that was a little bit of a derailment there, because I just had that question and I'd been thinking about it, and I wanted to ask you about it when we finally had a chance to talk. But so, what is your plan for this year? You got a plan?
Well, I have a tentative plan.
Oh, okay. So now we backed off the tentative. Okay, I see where we're headed here.
No, I do have a plan. I normally don't hunt anywhere for whitetail other than Kentucky and West Virginia, and if I have time, I'll go to Ohio. But um, definitely going to spend some more time in Kentucky just because, you know, I've fallen in love with that state, deer hunting, and just the terrain, the different terrain from eastern Kentucky all the way to western Kentucky, it just changes. Um, and then first time that I've ever put in for tags, you know, I drew in Kansas, so I'm pretty stoked about that.
Oh, you should be. I'm stoked for you. I'm actually a little bit bummed I'm not going, to be honest with you.
You know, so I'm really, so I need to be back. I want to be back in West Virginia, like the 12th through the 20th of November. So, and I always like to be in Kentucky the last week of October. So I'll go from Kentucky to Kansas, and I want to be in Kansas like from Halloween to like the 10th or 11th.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of my, so that'll take up, you know, there's 5 weeks right there. And then most likely it could happen the first day back in West Virginia, but most likely I'll end up grinding the rest of the season out.
Right. Nice.
You know, in West Virginia. But I am stoked about Kansas. I've never, you know, I've hunted in Indiana and hunted Missouri, but I've never hunted Kansas, and really don't even know what I'm getting myself into. But I'm gonna go out there and give it hell and do a lot of glassing and see what I can come up with on the ground. I mean, not against getting in the tree by any means, but I feel like it's going to be just a full-on ground hunt out there.
Yeah. I'm excited for you, man. I know we chatted a little bit about Kansas, like when the tag or when the putting in for them came around, and we chatted a little bit about it. I'm stoked that you're getting out there. I wish that I were going with you because I want to hunt. So we got to try to time it up one of these years where we can both get out there together, because I just think that would be a blast. But yeah, you're gonna. What are your kind of thoughts and feelings about heading out there? Like, what's your, you know, because you've not been out there, you know, to hunt, you know, whitetails before. Like, what are you kind of mentally kind of thinking about or preparing for, or whatever the case is, to kind of get yourself ready to, you know, for that hunt?
So I have zero. The only person I've spoke to is I've spoke to you. I talked to Chancey a little bit, and I've talked with Warp some, because I was going back and forth. I had so many points in Kansas. I was going back and forth whether to get a muley tag or go out for the early muzzleloader season or do the whitetail. And ultimately, like, I feel like for me, whether I have any, you know, I think going out there and having a good hunt is going to be successful for me. I'm not going out there with any expectations.
Mm-hmm.
But like, I think for me to go out and experience, you know, November in Kansas is what I should do. So I ended up putting in for the archery tag and got the units that I wanted. Don't know if they're the right units, because I mean, I called you about it. I called Warb about it. We talked about units. I ended up going with 2 units that that nobody really even mentioned, but that was my choice, and so I figure that my big thing is going out there is not having like these full-on expectations, and just go out and have a good trip and experience it. But I'm going to focus 2 or 3 days on just kind of driving and glassing, and then try to come up with a game plan to come up with a hunt if I see a deer or something, and just have a good time and let it just do me, really. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And just take it all in, but talking to people, like they were like, "Oh, you'll see, 1,540s." It's for me. It's very. I don't care if I'm in Kansas or West Virginia. Like a 140 walks past me, I don't care where I'm at.
Yeah.
Like arrows are flying.
Yeah. That's right, man. Yeah, man. I 100%.
So I'm just going out. I'm just going out for the hunt and experience it.
I think you're going out with the right mindset, like, to be honest with you. And I love the way you're kind of approaching it, because like you already, in my opinion, you're already so far ahead of like where I think a lot of guys are when they head out there for the first time, because it is a different world. Like, I'll be the first one to admit it. It's one of those places. I think the plains are in general. If you're not from a plains state, it hunts so much different than, the East Coast or the Midwest or whatever the case is. At least for me, it did. And I think sometimes people, I've talked to other buddies about this, one buddy in particular where I was like, I just told him, I was like, man, if you've never been out there before, if you don't have like a 7 to 10 day, like I almost feel like 10 days you got to do. I was like, if it's your first trip, I was like, cause you got to spend a couple of days just getting the lay of the land and figure out where deer want to be, and then you need some days to hunt them, and that was kind of like how I kind of felt about it. And so I love the way you're kind of approaching, like walking in, knowing that like, I'm going to spend like 3 days glassing before I even say boo, unless there's a stock opportunity that just kind of presents,
Right.
You know what I mean?
That's
Cause
right.
that's how Chad and I went out the first year, where we were like, I think we spent the first 3 days just driving, and what we kind of said was like, hey, if we have a stock opportunity, we'll do it. But, we're not going to actually like get out on the ground and hunt until we kind of start to figure out where some deer are at, so we're not just wasting time,
Right.
Because you have such a visual advantage out there if you can find the right spots to glass, that I don't want to say it makes it easy. I mean, it certainly doesn't make it easy, but it gives you a sense of like what's happening, and that's really kind of what you need to get at first. And so I think you have and just going out, and you're right, man. I'm glad, because I know when we were talking about it, you were going back and forth with like muzzle loader or what time of year you were going to go. And I think I remembered saying to you, like, man, if you're going to go out to Kansas, like you want to go out and experience like the rut, because you'll have an opportunity, whether or not you see it or not, I don't know, but you'll have an opportunity to potentially see like, and get the full Kansas experience, and to me, that was what I wanted. And I got it the first year. Like, we didn't see a bunch of big deer that year, but like we saw a handful of like really big deer, and close, and so and that was kind of what hooked me, where it was like, man, the experience of this, and it can be Kansas or any other plain state where you can kind of watch from afar and like get on them or whatever. But that was just like the cool part for me, was like, I think for me, like there really wasn't ever a day where I didn't feel like I was in the game. It always felt like you were like one turn away down a gravel road away from being in the game. You know what I mean? And so you stayed on the whole time. Like, I don't recall many days where I was just like, man, this sucks. It's like, no, because I could go around this bend and I could see the biggest deer I've ever seen in my life. You know what I mean? Or I could see like 150-inch deer fighting with another 150-inch deer in this CRP field. Like, those are all possibilities. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so you just feel like you're constantly in the game. Like anything could happen, and that to me was like the most intriguing part, which made the experience super cool.
Yeah. I mean, that's how I'm hoping is, if there comes an opportunity, we'll try it. Mm-hmm. If not, just take it in and just hunt and do us and do me and go about our business. I'm really looking forward to it. I know it's going to be a little different.
Yeah.
But it's all relative. Hunting wise, it's all relative in my opinion. Other than finding the deer and kind of learning the terrain as best as you can.
Right. Yeah, man. I'm looking forward to getting a text message from you while you're out there, because I think you're going to get hooked, and I think you're going to get hooked in about 12 hours.
Well, It doesn't take much for me, Clint.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
I've gone back and forth between there and Iowa, and I don't, Iowa's points. I keep on purchasing them, and they said, well, you can draw with 4, and now you can get good with 6. So this is not a trip of a lifetime, but this is like one of those whitetail trips that I've been wanting to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And then you're gonna have a camera guy with you on this trip, obviously, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Which will add a little different element to it. Like I'll just based on how flat it is and like, there's not always something necessary to get behind and how you get set up and stuff like that, right? Because, like the setup I was in last year, if I would have had a camera person with me, it's like I don't know how it would have worked out. You know what I mean? Just because I had enough cover basically for me, and that was about it.
For you, yeah.
You know what I mean? And even with that, I was probably skimping a little bit, depending on how they came in. Luckily they came in exactly how I thought they would, so I was good. But if they came in any other way, I was going to be in some trouble. Yeah,
I mean the camera always throws a kink in it, but it's like
is what it is.
It is part of it now. Like we don't even think about it. It's like hell, we might forget our bow before we forget our cameras anymore. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, the nice thing out there is too, is since it's a little flatter too, it's like you can actually set up a camera guy off of you if you need to, like 30, 40 yards, whatever it is. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because I mean, I know watching like the whitetail adrenaline guys, like they'll do that where like the camera guy, if it's a real tight situation, like the camera guy will just set up off of them like 50 yards or 40 yards or whatever and film it from there.
Yeah. Like I got Bucky, my decoy. That's what I named him last year. I want to use him. Mm-hmm. And it's not a decoy. It's just it's on my bow. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna try it some and see what happens. I don't do a lot of rattling sequences here, but
it'll work out there.
Yeah, I've heard that they're very responsive to calling. Mm-hmm. So I look forward to that because I like rattling and fooling with them and seeing what can turn up. Mm-hmm. So definitely looking forward to just just a different environment.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. So how are things with Untamed, man? You guys just trucking along? Do you cranking out videos, cranking up turkey videos? Dude, you guys you're busy, man.
Yeah, it's been busy. We ended up hiring. We hired a full-time guy, first one, which is really it's helped out tremendously. Taking the pressure off of us, it gives us it makes for better videos, from a dialogue perspective. Because before we were all just filming each other, and I'd be filming Zach, and then he'd say, "Okay, give me the camera. I'll get you doing something." Now we're catching the interaction between Jay and I, or Zach and Jay, me and Zach, whatever, without having to worry about us having a camera.
Right.
And also the amount of content that we've been putting out is 100% credit to Cole for getting it edited and getting it out. I mean, so really excited about that to keep on. And, it's slow season for us this year. I mean, not this year at this time of year. So pretty much just getting ready to start. Since turkey season ended, we haven't done a whole lot. We've caught up on work. Caught up, not caught up because I don't ever slow down getting to ball games and getting to family activities and Brody's activities. And so, but it's been more enjoyable because it's not like rushing to get there and walking in at the last minute and face paint and whatever. Yeah, I mean, I will go to ball games with face paint on.
Right.
Doesn't bother me a bit.
Right. Right.
But I don't, and that's the balance I was talking about. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
and you do it to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So we're all just real busy catching up with work, trying to stuff our coffers for the fall when we slow down. It's kind of that season to get stuff going, but still have my hounds. Don't run as much as I used to, but still running my hounds and frog season, which people thinks it's hilarious that we have a frog season, but frog season comes in next Saturday. So we're pretty excited about that. And then just doing some family vacations and enjoying the summer. Brody's not playing. He's not playing any travel baseball this year.
Okay.
So we're just going to kind of enjoy the summer and chill out and get ready for the fall and not have a whole lot of time stresses.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. That travel baseball, man, that's a lot. So I'm sure that's a big chunk of the calendar that comes back to you.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty much every weekend. But it's, that was his choice because, Stacey and I would have, we'll support him, whatever he wants to do, but he chose to take the summer off and we're good with that. And so but it's going to give us time to do stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%, man. I mean, you always have to have a little bit of space is often good.
Yeah.
Especially at that age too, like recognizing where, he wants a little bit of time to, because I think sometimes, especially like with that, athletics, man, it's like you love it and you get after it as much as you can. And then, you sometimes get lost in it a little bit. Right. And you miss out on really enjoying those times of being a kid. You know what I mean? Like there's more than, because I played travel ball growing up and stuff like that. And I just think back, I'm like, I mean, it was fun. I had a great time doing it and, wrestling tournaments in the summer and stuff like that. But but I also look back on and think like the summers that I didn't do that stuff. I'm like, man, those were really fun summers. Like I had a great time, even though I wasn't playing ball or wrestling or whatever. It was like, that was a great summer. Give you a chance to be a kid.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, Brody, he was playing all three major sports, football, basketball, and baseball. And he's not playing football this year. And that was his decision. He's like, I only got to hunt 2 days last year. He said, I didn't get to go to camp because we got like a deer camp, like a old school deer camp, no electricity, no water. But he's been up there. And when he started going, he started falling in love with it. Like just going up there, no cell service. It's cooking, playing cards, hunting, and having some beer sitting around the fire. Man, he loved it. And he was like, I only got to hunt 2 days last year. And I was like, well, and I've told him, that you only go through high school once. You only get so many bus rides. You only get so many locker rooms. You only get so much of this team stuff. I said, it could be over when you graduate, and then you can hunt all you want.
Yep.
But so he decided not to play football, and that I'm happy about it. I'm not going to tell him.
Right.
Because that gives he and I more time together. Yeah. And that's what the grains going through the hourglass, man, you can't get them back.
Oh, tell me about it, man. It's crazy.
And his time and when he and I get to spend time together, it's I truly like cherish every minute I can spend with him, because I know it's going to, as he gets older, it's going to be more time apart and him going on with doing his life. And so I try to get all I can.
Yeah. It is crazy, isn't it, man? Because I mean, he's a sophomore this year, right?
He's going to be a sophomore.
He's
He's the
going to
same
be.
age as your daughter.
Okay, yeah. Anna was a sophomore this year. She'll be a junior.
Oh, okay.
Next year. Yeah,
Okay,
she's just young.
yeah.
She's just young for her class. She's like the youngest one in her class.
Okay.
And so I know what you're saying because I've been thinking about that, and I was like, what actually dawned on me, I was like, man, 2 more years. I was like, my wife and I are going to be empty nesters, which is crazy to think about, Yeah. And Anna doesn't hunt. She did when she was younger. It's just not something that she, took to, and maybe she will. She gets, older and moves along in life. But she and I do jujitsu together, and so that's whenever I get to spend some time with her. We'll usually catch like a round together on the mats, and have a go at it. And I'll let her kind of choke me or get into a position or whatever, and then we'll talk about it after, and we'll kind of laugh, and then every now and then I got to put the gas on her a little bit.
Yeah, that's right. You always got to keep them in check.
That's right. That's right. She did something the one night. She was just talking. She was talking. She chops it up with my buddies, like because all my buddies like her that train there. She trains with all the guys. So all the guys will roll with her and stuff like that. And she'll start talking shit like in the gym. Like she'll start, like she starts walking a little taller, and so she was giving me some grief like the one night, and I was just like, you better watch that sass mouth. It's going to get you in trouble, and so we got around together that night, and I don't remember what all happened. I mean, I submitted her a couple of times or whatever, and I was a little, because she's getting better, like she's getting tough, like admittedly, like all the guys in the room like will say like, hey, I was rolling with your daughter the other night. She's getting tough, man. Like she's got a good guard or whatever, And she is getting tougher. And so I kind of put it on her the one night a little bit, and we got done, and I let her up, and I was like, how was that? And she was like looking at me with her eyes like wide, like kind of wobbling a little bit, and I was like, that was borderline child abuse there, wasn't it? And she was like, yeah.
That's a piece of humble pie.
Yeah, it was good though, But I get what you're saying, man, because I'm very, acutely aware of the sands going through the hourglass, for those types of things. And it was a young kid at the gym actually said to me one time, because he's like in his 20s, and we were rolling together, and I had a thing at my house, like, and he came over, and we were just kind of chatting about it, and he just asked me, he said, hey, he's like, I heard someone tell me one day, he's like, I'm just curious, like, how true this is. He was like, everyone always talks about how when you get older, how time flies by, and I'm like, it sure does, it just seems like a couple weeks ago I stopped hunting season last year, and here we are almost to turn around to be back in hunting season again, just as an example. He's like, I had an old timer tell me one time that the years pass by equal to the miles per hour equal to your year, to your age. And I was like, wow. I was like, I never thought of it that way. I was like, but that's pretty accurate. I was like, because when you're 10, it feels like a year's forever, but you're only moving like 10 miles per hour. Yeah. Your life is only moving at 10 miles per hour. I was like, when you're in your 20s, it still moves pretty slow because like you're going through life at like 20, 25 miles per hour. It's like you're not really getting anywhere real quick, It's like, but when you're in our age and you're in your 40s, it's like, man, things start zipping by pretty quick. You know what I mean? I was like, and I just thought that was a really good analogy, and it made me kind of stop and think like, wow, man, I need to try to savor some of this stuff like more than I am, because whether it's hunting or time with family or whatever the case it is, because I'm realizing how much more quickly it goes by me. And I'm remembering things where I'm like, oh yeah, that was like a year ago. It's like, no, that was 7 years ago. I'm like, oh man,
yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, so it's stuff like that I'm conscious of. And, and so I'm glad you're getting to spend more time with Brody in the woods and stuff like that, man. Cause
yeah, man, I'm pumped about it. And then, I mean, it doesn't matter to me if we're just sitting in the driveway.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Those are times that, you ain't getting back either.
Yeah.
But
dude, one of my favorite videos you did was you teaching him how to drive I think it was the Jeep.
Shit, man.
Oh my God, dude.
God.
I laughed out loud at it while I was watching it on Instagram, I think. And Megan looked at me. She's like, what are you laughing? I was like, dude, you got to see Josh teaching Brody how to drive.
Dude. And I'll give him credit. He ended up getting good with it. But now we had a blast that day that he first started driving. Now he was a little bit stressed.
Mm-hmm.
But it was like he never going to forget it. You know what I mean? And I damn sure ain't never going to forget it.
Oh my god! I just remember you said it was just like the quintessential what I refer to as like the Josh Ilderton voice and the way you talk. You're like, now let the clutch out, and he lets it out. He's like, oh, get you, and he grabs second. And you're like, oh, get you a gear there.
Yeah. He ain't gonna let her eat right off the bat.
Oh man!
But those times, man, those are that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
And I don't think that he'll forget those times. Those times that it gets spotlighted.
Yeah.
It's crazy how fast our kids grow up.
It is.
When you really start thinking about it.
Yeah.
And that's why I tell buddies that are having infants now, I was like, man, you really should focus.
Take the time.
Because hell, Brody's first 8, 9 years, 10 years, I worked my ass off. Didn't matter if it was 15, 16 hours a day. I was still there. I still coached T-ball and all that, but it wasn't like there was a focus there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Until the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
And then something hit me on time. And I was like, man, you can run a company, and because I really feel like it's the same thing with deer hunting, same thing with work. The more you put into it, the more that you get rewarded. If you wake up and you're a hard worker, mm-hmm. and you make some, average decisions, as long as you're a hard worker and do good work, you're going to be successful. It's not real hard, and don't spend more than what you're bringing in. That's pretty mm-hmm. much the gist of business. Mm-hmm. But you can work 15, 16 hours a day and grind your ass off, and life pass you by, and you can make this level of a living, but then it comes to it, and it's like, man, when you really start thinking about time, mm-hmm. and it going through that hourglass, there ain't no amount of, I would take everything I have to be able to take a teaspoon of the sand and put it back in the top.
Yep.
And so like 4 or 5 years ago, when I started thinking about my time and how valuable time is actually, mm-hmm. I slowed way down.
Yeah. It's, I definitely made concessions career-wise for the same reason. Probably about the same time frame. Like probably about 3-4 years ago is when I still have, a good career and stuff like that and do good. And but I wasn't looking for like a promotion, and I made it clear that that's not what I'm looking for, And I just set pretty hard boundaries around like, what I'm willing to do, when I'm willing to extend myself further, and when I won't. And the criteria I used, and because someone asked me something, I was like, I can't do it. And they're like, well, what do you mean you can't do it? I'm like, I got other priorities. Like after work, I got to go, take care of X, Y, Z, right? Take my daughter somewhere, like whatever it was, right? Family oriented. And I just said, I was like, here's my criteria. I was like, you tell me which of the people that own the company or which of the people on my team are going to show up to my funeral. I was like, and then I'll tell you how much time I'm going to give you.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know what I mean? I was like, because the people I'm going to go take care of now, all of them will miss me. I was like, and all of you would just be happy if I was replaced and someone did the same work that I was doing.
That's right.
I was like, that's my criteria. I was like, would you show up to my funeral? I was like, whenever you put it in those terms, man, it makes prioritizing really, really easy, and it simplifies who should get your time.
Yeah. That's a good way to look at it.
Yeah. Now there's always exceptions to the rule. You know what I mean? It's like I'm not rigid, in that way. But you know what I mean? But like as a general guideline, like that's my guideline.
Yeah.
But well, dude, we've been on here chopping it up for like, I don't know, like almost like an hour and 45 minutes. Speaking of family time, I want to make sure you get a little of that family time in this evening.
Good, dude.
You know,
I'm glad we finally got on here.
I know, man. I know, dude. It's like I miss talking to you. I miss seeing you. I wish we lived closer. You know, one of these days I'm going to make it to West Virginia. I promise you. You did your 14-hour trip to Philadelphia, so I'll make it down to see you. But before I let you run out of here, let people know where they can follow along with you, where they can follow along with the Untamed and everything you have going on.
Yeah, check us out on our YouTube channel, Instagram, and Facebook. It's all under the Untamed, and come check us out and watch. If you like it, hit the like button, follow button, subscribe button. If you don't, it's all good. Keep on doing your thing, and you know. We'll keep on keeping on.
Right. That's awesome, man. Yeah, dude. I appreciate you, man. Like I said, I love talking to you. We have to make sure it's not so much time in between. And you're just one of the good people, dude. Friendship.
Yeah, man. I appreciate that.
All right, folks, that is a wrap for today's show. I'd like to thank all of you for listening, and if you haven't yet, please head over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating, and be sure to subscribe to the podcast, and hell, while you're at it, head over to YouTube and give us a sub there too. And before I shut this thing down, we need to give a big shout out to our partners who continue to help us make this podcast possible. Osseo Gear, Tethered, Exodus Outdoor Gear, and Genesee Beer. And until next time, we'll see y'all.